As it is up to gymnasts and choreographers to offer artistic routines, it is up to the judges to evaluate and reward them. Since its birth and its officialization by the FIG, the RG has always carried high the idea of a perfect symbiosis between sport and artistry. The question here is not whether we can judge art. Firstly, because Kent has already answered the question, and secondly, it is my video, so I do what I want. From 1970 to today, rhythmic gymnastics went through 9 Olympic cycles and 14 different codes of points. We will examine how the artistic requirements have evolved, what tools were given to judges to enhance or penalize the artistic, and finally the real effectiveness of the COP on artistic judgment. The first code of point was published in 1970. Back then, until the first Olympics, the artistic evaluation was conducted with norms of aesthetic mastery. The composition was to be based neither on folklore or choreography, nor on the tragic mime and representation by the movements of characters, situations, ideas or feelings, nor on the acrobatic elements specific to artistic gymnastics, to clearly differentiate themselves from dance, circus and artistic gymnastics.
A second period emerged from the 1980s onwards. Artistic borrowings complied with harder and harder technical requirements. The rhythmic gymnastic and aesthetics spirit was still expressed in a neither-nor way, neither ballet, nor mime, nor acrobatics, as it was considered indispensable that the gymnastic routine find its own way of expression and artistry. The jury board was organized into composition and execution juries. The note of the artistic was mixed with the technical score to give the composition score on 5 points. The execution takes into account only the technical faults on 5 points. This system changes in 1997, when the artistic score became independent from the composition score next to the technical score and the execution note on 10 points. The term artistic officially appeared in regulations from 1997 onwards. Artistic value was therefore separated from technical value. It did not really change the importance of the notation, but it allowed to clearly show the importance of the artistic and separate this score from technical aspects the jury board's mind. The guidelines for the artistic notation of the 1985 to 1988 code are interesting in the sense that they are the influence of the artistic vision in rhythmic gymnastics for the rest of its existence. The main objective of the artistic component is to bring emotion and the idea of expression, both translated through the following 5 aspects. Music. Flow. Expressivity. Variety. And finally, what I called out edge. It is composition faults and others artistic requirements that are called artistry but that aren't really.
Just keep it together till the end of the routine. So no mistakes so far that we can obviously see. Oh, what a shot!
This 5 dimensions will remain the same until today and will experience variations of importance during the different code of points. From the beginning, the 1985 code laid the bases with indications on the various dimensions, except expressivity. Concerning music, the major artistic requirement is that the routine be based on the temperament of the gymnast, the pace and character of the music chosen. Concerning the flow, the gymnast should demonstrate the use of motion fluency, coordination elements, flexibility and the dynamic relationship between the gymnast and the apparatus. The flow includes grace, elegance, fluidity, the disarming ease of difficult moves in accordance with the music. Without the flow, rhythmic gymnastics cannot assert its artistic quality. The artist is one whose techniques, ingenuity, efforts are not seen. The artist masks the technical ropes. And it is for this reason that the flow of a routine is considered of paramount importance. Finally, the variety is very quickly mentioned in the notation of the artistic. Does it make sense? The valorization of the variety can be seen as a kind of carrot and stick for choreographers and gymnasts. The demand for variety must not encourage the use of overdone elements, easily applied to a music. But must encourage the search for new elements expressing the musical articulations. The 1985 code penalized unbalanced composition, the lack of alternation of fast and slow passages and the lack of variety in apparatus handling. The following codes go in this direction, with the precision of the criteria of varieties for body and apparatus elements, as well as for trajectories, levels and forms of displacement. The emergence of the body and facial expressions in relation with the interpretation of the music as important features of choreographic compositions, the emergence of the concept of background music and the introduction of evaluation forms of the routines to reduce subjectivity. We thus observe during this second stage, a structuration of the notation of the artistic, starting from the vague idea, since subjective, but how important, of the relation music and movement, to finish with the appearance of criteria and of tools that should allow a more objective scoring, such as the notion of variety and the evaluation forms. Symbolically at the end of this second stage, the previous rhythmic sport gymnastics is established as rhythmic gymnastics, the mentioned sport being henceforth considered a pejorative redundancy.
The next psychoanalyzed could be considered the first portrait of contemporary rhythmic gymnastics. Indeed, while the technical difficulty made a considerable leap and pushed choreographers to compact routine, the artistic side began to suffer, especially since the powers given to the artistic judges are very meager. First of all, the scoring scale changed. The execution remained always on 10 points, but the technical value was now on 10 points and the artistic value was on 10 points. Therefore, compared to the previous code, the execution lost importance compared to the technical value and the artistic value. However, in artistic value, not everything was really artistic. Out of 10 points, 2 points were awarded for musical aspects and 8 points for the choreography, including 2 points for basic composition and 6 points for special artistic characteristics. The notation of the musical aspects on 2 points corresponds to the respect of the strict harmony between the character and the rhythm of the music through the exercise and its movements. The notation of the basic composition include a guiding idea performed from beginning to end, the choice of body and apparatus elements, balance between right and left hand, acrobatic elements, use of space and variety of the choreography. Finally, special artistic characteristics corresponds to what would be called today apparatus difficulty and originality. So in reality, the real artistic part had only 4 points, which did not leave a lot of room for the judges to strongly penalize or value artistry and routines. Because if the work with the apparatus can be considered as artistic, this work is useless if unexpressive and unmusical. The situation does not improve much with the 2005 code. The score is now based on the sum of the composition and execution totaling 20 points. In addition, only 3 points are now completely awarded to the artistic notation. 1 point maximum for the respective harmony, rhythm and character of the music, but also for having a music badly cut or with inappropriate noises. And all these penalties could not exceed 1 point. Besides, 2 points maximum for basic composition. The majorities of the penalties concern the 4 other dimensions, being mainly elements of artic, like starting position not justified, acrobatic element without coordination with apparatus, statism, or overuse of a non-compulsory group of body element. Nevertheless, the lack of variety is largely detailed, perhaps too much to be understandable and usable, with penalties ranging from -0.1 to 0.5, while the absence of series of rhythmic steps and the absence of unify in the composition are penalized -0.3, marking a beginning of return towards the idea of a routine with character. The remaining 7 points are still awarded to special artistic characteristics. On the final score out of 20, this amounts to 1.5 points, which leaves little room for judges to penalize or value the artistic efforts of a routine.
After the 2008 Olympic Games, the dilemma between technique and artistic had been more than heard. The Code 2013 to 2017 is often cited as the code of the artistic's return. Yet the formal changes are felt as early as 2009, with a major revision of the scoring system. The 2009 code presented a new organization of the judge board with the evaluation of the body and apparatus elements on 10 points, of the execution on 10 points and of the artistry on 10 points. The evaluation of the artistic component obtained a very important character, as it acquires a judgment completely independent of the rest, an evaluation form and more specific guidelines. Some music penalties are more severe. The notion of flow becomes more important with the appearance of the penalty interruption in the logical connection of movements. The purely artistic note is no longer limited to 4 or 3 points. The number of artistic penalties is reduced, but focuses more on the first 4 dimensions, and less on the artech dimension. Finally, the sequence of rhythmic steps must submit a variation of the apparatus work. Although there are still some oddities of artistic penalization, like lack of uniform distribution of difficulties, unauthorized pre-acrobatic element, or for each missing risk, the 2009 code marks a progress in a more objective judgment and more truly focused on the artistic. However, many judges still remain marked by the previous codes, and the mastery of the artistic notation sheet, yet very clear, and its use at maximum power are not yet perfect. The 2013 to 2016 cycle is often considered as the code of the artistic's return. However, the artistic penalties remain substantially the same as the previous code, with a distribution nevertheless more homogeneous of penalties in the 5 dimensions. The big change is the new division in 2 of the judge board, between difficulty and execution. The evaluation of the artistic issues of the routine became the responsibility of the execution jury. The problem with this code, despite being willing to do well, is to have had a jury for both technical mistakes and artistic mistakes, which resulted in an artistic judgment often hasty after the routine is over, without true reflection, which the current code corrects by setting up two separate juries. The other flaw of this code is that, having a common technical and artistic execution note, it is impossible to have the details of the penalties directly. Nevertheless, by reducing artistic penalties to simple and clear explanations, this code has had the merit of calming the rough sea of artistic notation.
Although the code of 2009 and 2013 have made considerable efforts, the current code remains the most advanced code of the judgment of the artistic. First, a single jury deals with artistic penalties. They are focused solely on that. They can let their emotions breathe. Then, the code of 2017 tries to face the second problem posed by the judgment of the artistic, the objectivity. To make the judgment more objective, the 2017 code aims to provide much more detailed explanations than what we have seen before, all accompanied by videos. Judges can penalize two things: lack of character and lack of harmony with the music. For the character, it could be summarized this way: character fully present in every steps. A defined character is present between or during the majority, but not all, of the connecting movements and dance steps. A defined character or style is not fully developed in the dance steps. They are mainly walking, running or skipping to the accents without regard to the specific musical style. A defined character is present between or during some of the connecting elements and movements. There is no defined character of movement between the difficulties, which are presented as only a series of difficulties without a style of movement connected to the music. A defined character is only present during the dance steps combination. No character. Those descriptions are great because they are very detailed. That's not precise, but artistry can't be reduced to number. With respect to the harmony with the music, the code is very simple: -0.1 whenever it does not match with the music, up to 1 point, -1 point is the music is used as a background, -0.2 point if the gymnast's movements do not respect dynamic changes in the music or if the gymnast's movements do not create dynamic changes when the music lacks dynamic changes, and finally, -0.50 for absence of harmony between music and movement at the end of the exercise. On the other hand, they are not the easiest to use and are the most subjective. Does everyone have the same impression of a music?
Yes! You are a loony.
In addition, the lack of harmony with the music can sometimes last 6 seconds, sometimes barely a beat, but the penalty is the same. This leads the judges to penalize only the big lack of harmony with the music, those who are really visible, forgetting the gymnasts who make a true effort so that each movement is in adequacy with the slightest breaths of music. The penalty on the lack of dynamics, resulting from the old rule of alternating fast and slow passage, is rather strange and redundant. Indeed, saying the gymnast's movements do not respect dynamic changes in the music returns to the penalization a lack of harmony between the music. In addition, the obligation to create dynamic changes by one's body or a movement is sometimes misunderstood. The idea is interesting, forcing sometimes choreographers to go against the current pace music, such as moving quickly on a slow music, which can create an interesting contrast. We sometimes see gymnasts who change their dynamics without really understanding why, simply because it is penalized. Stepping to the beat, matching the music, different story. Judges penalized one thing: lack of connection, an isolated interruption, each time up to 1 point, as for example a preparation too long for a risk, all these little breaks that destroy the magic of a routine. For groups, the penalty is more severe and without limitation. Concerning the expressivity, the judges penalize the lack of use of each part of the body. Every body segment must participate in expressing the music. In addition, for individual gymnasts, the presence of 2 waves is required. This obligation surely comes from the fact that the wave is considered a fundamental element of the rhythmic gymnastics. The lack of variety is penalized according to 3 points of view: space, movement, work with the apparatus. The demand for variety is not an absolute, but rather a means to wonder which element could perfectly express a music. The more color you have, the better you can paint the snow. Finally, the judge simply deals with other penalties more technical than artistic. The advantage, contrary to previous codes, is that these penalties are less and less under the responsibility of the artistic jury, allowing it to focus the more artistic aspects. Even with this arsenal of penalties, there are still elements that the judgment can never retranslate. And all this is based on the judge's shoulders, their feelings, their willingness, their objectivity, their stomachs and their number of hours of sleep. This was simply a quick brushing of the chaotic evolution of the artistic scoring and its application today, which highlights a rather okay current code, at least in its theoretical use. The current code is certainly not perfect, but the most accomplished we've seen, the question remaining in its use. Indeed, in any period, one always finds a sufficiently artistic routine to be appreciated. The problem is rather how choreographers and judges use the code, which do not always encourage more artistic research.